Hey everyone, welcome to this weekly Sidereal Astrology forecast for the week of September 21st to the 27th of 2020. All right, so this week we have essentially a lot of squares going on astrologically, which can make it a very constructive week, but good to challenge ourselves to integrate things, especially in the context of any new beginnings from late last week's new moon. Last week around Thursday, we had a new beginning with our more improvement-oriented side, making this still a great week for building good habits, good routines, and all in all striving towards improvement in our lives and with ourselves. So with this, essentially the squares we have this week are primarily with Mercury, the planet of communication, and also of our thoughts and rationalizing things. So on Monday, Mercury will be square Pluto, so good to use our deep mind on Monday and deeper communications in constructive ways. Wednesday, Mercury will be squaring up to Saturn, forming a T-square with Mars and Saturn. So maybe a more disciplined mind could be very constructive. Disciplined and patient communications could be a great way of working with that. Thursday, Mercury will be opposite up to that Mars exact. So with all of this, I think it's important to find this balance between all this more doing energy of improvement with Virgo, yet finding balance with more receptivity, more acceptance, more rest, more of that spiritual health aspect of things, while we do focus on the more material, physical aspects of matters. All right, and this all culminates as we go into next week. Mars will then start to square up to Saturn exact next week. So as we get into the weekend, good to see how we can simply take the more long-term approach to things in life. Really good to see how it's good to be patient, disciplined, responsible when it comes to where we're putting our action and energy. All right, so let's take a look at all of this here, as well as a weekly recap here in more detail when we return. All right, so here is the sky for this week. We're going to look at this for each day of the week, starting first with Monday. And if you are new to the channel, notice that the signs are different sizes here that we're using here, using the visible sky. You notice Virgo is a very large constellation, for example, and Libra much smaller, Scorpio smaller, Ophiuchus a different constellation than mainstream. So essentially we are using the visible sky here called True Sidereal Astrology. If you are new to the channel, definitely check out the link down below for more information. All right, so let's take a look at this week. First, let's do a weekly recap. Looking at where the placements are for this week. We do have the Sun, who's recently entered Virgo, where we've had this new moon, and Mercury's also here. So like I was saying, this week and really for the coming months, it is good to still have this more improvement-oriented nature on things. How can we do things that do require solving problems, fixing things, finding solutions, and anything that's about building good habits, good routines, or skills could make this a very constructive way of working with this time period, especially this week as we will be coming up to the first quarter phase of the lunar cycle, suggesting challenging ourselves to implement this kind of energy in our life. And if there were new things from last Thursday that have started to surface, could be good to start to implement. Now Venus, with all that, Venus is in a much easier placement here in expressive Leo. So the context when it comes to what we're enjoying and possibly in our relationships could be fun. You know, Venus and Leo is good for having some fun, some self-expression, some maybe creative energy, playful energy, both coming through in our enjoyments and how we're connecting here at this time. Now, of course, Mars is still in Pisces, now retrograde for his very long transit of this constellation. And so for the past months, it's already been very important to have more receptivity to where we're putting action. Right, so if we have an intention, we have a direction, we have a goal, it's good to take a more receptive approach to that, kind of accept things for how they are, surrender what's outside of our control, and put our energy towards the more etheric or current, you know, the underlying energies, the spiritual energies of life. You know, what's important to us on a soul level, and put action and energy towards that. What's our intuition saying? Putting energy towards that, right? This kind of more watery approach to taking action, which is normally fire, is a great way of working with Mars in Pisces, especially this week, as we'll talk about, because Mercury will be aspecting Mars. So I will be talking a lot this week about, you know, it being squares and good week for challenging ourselves, but do keep in mind this can end up being a very constructive week. Collectively, we could get a lot done productively, but also in our personal life could be very constructive. And so just a great week for setting intentions all in all. So let's go and start first with Monday. We do have the moon finishing up Libra on Monday and then starting to go into deeper Scorpio. So Monday is still good for finding balance. If there's anything we can find more balance with in our life, maybe some themes around doing the right thing, justice, morality, ethics. This could be a great way of working with the first part. But as we do get to the later part, it will have this deeper energy of Scorpio going into Tuesday, which could be good for connecting to the more deeper values of life and trust in our deeper relationships and connecting to what really matters most, both for ourselves and others, to dive deep. And this is already the case anyways on Monday, I would say, because Mercury is squaring up to deep Pluto. So we may have felt this on Sunday, but Monday could be good to channel any deep mind we may have into something constructive, and maybe our communications could be very constructive with this. Because with Pluto unveils things. We're just more aware of deeper things like fears, inhibitions, the deeper aspects of life. And so if there's any way to channel this constructively, either using our minds like through learning, maybe doing some writing, or communicating this stuff in a conscious way, makes this a very constructive and very empowering and transformative part of the week here, this early part. All right, so then as we start to get into Tuesday, the moon in Scorpio starting to go into a fucus, which both deal with, again, excavating, bringing deeper things to the surface for ourselves and others in our relationships. And then Mercury starts to square up to Saturn, forming what is essentially a T-square this later part of the week between Mercury square Saturn and Mercury opposite Mars. So here around Wednesday, if there is a more serious mind, sometimes with Mercury square Saturn, Saturn represents the reality of things and the denser aspects of things. So it is good to see things realistically, but not too realistically or too densely to where it becomes heavy or we're not, utilizing it, right? If it's preventing us from doing something. So good to channel this though. Good to see, is there anything that we know might take work or time with maybe learning? Could be a great time of buckling down doing that, or things that utilize our mind in some ways, or maybe communication, right? Something that we may feel like might again take time or be a little more difficult. By challenging ourselves to do it can be very, very constructive. So all in all, just to bring some good conscious attention to the mind and our communications this week, and around Thursday, how can we do so in a way that's patient and channeling it towards the longer term perspectives with Saturn in Sagittarius. All right, and so then as we start to get into Thursday, the moon will start to go into expansive Sagittarius, coming out of the deeper energies, which we're making it really good for, again, excavating things, bringing things to the surface earlier in the week. But Thursday onwards, we'll probably start to feel a little bit more of the expansive energies of Sag. This is where we were in the more deeper cocoon phase of the lunar cycle, now starting to go into the more expansive and free-spirited phase of the cycle. And this is also because we start to come out of, slowly, as we get into the weekend, come out of the square between the sun and moon, the first quarter moon. So usually with this, we start to build a little bit more momentum in the cycle and come out of any stronger, challenging type of energy that's sometimes the case during the first quarter moon. But do give it some time. But nonetheless, going into the weekend, how can we expand our horizons and get into some of that more free-spirited energy, whether it's literal, such as through adventurousness, or maybe it's mental, through philosophy, spirituality, abstract things. Really good to expand both our minds and our literal horizons here. All right, so with this on Thursday, though, good to find the balance between the doing and being sort of energies. We do have, again, that Mercury in Virgo. So while it is a time of, again, finding solutions and improving, like I was saying earlier, opposite that is Mars in that receptive Pisces. So being more receptive to the flows of life, and maybe sometimes, finding the balance between work and rest, and what's important on a physical level, but also what's important on a spiritual level. And if there is any push and pull to, maybe go to any extremes with Mars, which could be pursuing our needs very, sometimes overly directly or overly ambitiously, too much fire. Good to kind of just be conscious of that, because sometimes oppositions to Mars can be one extreme or the other. But it could also be maybe not enough. If there isn't enough directness in our communications, not enough fire behind what we're doing, then maybe challenging yourself to bring that into balance. So essentially, again, finding the balance between doing, being, water, fire, right? This kind of energy could be really good to cultivate here around Thursday. And maybe some things coming ahead in terms of maybe some insights, because sometimes oppositions can also symbolize some insights coming in, especially with Mercury, in regards to where we do want to take action and put our motivation and drive. And then it's just a matter of starting to incorporate that moving forward. All right, and then like I said, the weekend, no major aspects going exact, but we will have that more free-spirited energy of Sag. But we will start to feel probably more and more as we get into next week, this Mars square Saturn. So this is really the crux of the T-square here that we're talking about. And it's fiery Mars, which is again our actions and our needs and our drives, squaring up to patient Saturn, the reality of things. So good to see again, what is the long term with our goals, right? And sometimes it can feel like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, but then maybe, you know, half step forward and another step forward. It's a very slow, methodical kind of energy, but it can be very constructive. Essentially, it's starting to test us to make sure this is really what we want, for example. And are we willing to put in the time and the patience and the responsibility into these long-term plans? Because if we're willing to put in the time, Saturn's test is if we're willing to put in the time, then it is something that is truly important to us on that level. So great time to do that. How can we match up our short-term goals with our long-term goals? Again, challenge ourselves to put in any discipline, patience towards our actions. And of course, with Mars and Pisces, just being as receptive as we can, especially with Mars retrograde at the moment, to see where the ebb and flow of life might be taking us and how we can align to that. All right, so quite the week here astrologically. Like I said, it could be very constructive. Don't let these squares be, you know, too inhibiting if it looks more challenging. It's usually weeks like this that, like I said, we do get a lot done, and it can be very constructive for both personal and spiritual development. The main thing here is any new things from late last week that we do want to implement could be great, especially if it deals with improvement and refinement. And really this week, a lot of it's concentrated around Mercury. So using our mind constructively with patience, right, and all this with balance, communication as well, correspondence, our routines, our day-to-day activities, right? Great week to challenge yourself with. And going into next week, how can we put some action towards some long-term things that do require patience and responsibility here in life. All right, so everyone have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to click that like button if you haven't yet. And down below, there's the MTZ Insiders newsletter. If you do want more videos like this one, emailed to you directly, do check that out. But have a great week. Thank you again, and I'll see you all in the next weekly forecast. Take care.